Welcome to this episode of the Strong Kind Podcast. This episode is with Mika Reilly. Mika is a physical therapist. She has also, unfortunately, torn her ACL multiple times, which the first incidents spurred her on to becoming a physical therapist. The second happened in adulthood, so it's given her a lot of context and insight into the journey that can take place for somebody who's in their 30s when it comes to an ACL reconstruction and the recovery from it. This was a really fun topic and discussion with Mika. We talked about identity during an injury like the ACL, an ACL tear, and then subsequent reconstruction and rehab. We talked about things that she has learned both from being a practitioner and a physical therapist and a coach herself, while also having had these injuries in her life. It's a really useful, empowering, and insightful conversation with Mika. She's a great follow. She is also a very kind and compassionate human being, and I really appreciate her coming on. You can follow Mika at Mica, M-I-C-A, Reilly, .dpt on Instagram. She works with young and adult women through the ACL recovery and rehab process. So go check her out. Thanks so much for being here. Appreciate you. If you're somebody struggling with pain and injury that's not an ACL reconstruction, or you're post ACL reconstruction and repair, and you're looking for good training that helps you manage your lifestyle, understand pain, and get back to performing well, I'd love to help you as well. You can follow me at drdave.strengthandkindness on Instagram. Thanks so much for being here. Really appreciate you. Peace. All right, I'm here with Mika. Mika, I have known you for a couple years now, and I was just saying this to you. Your journey is somewhat heartbreaking, but also it's not uncommon. So just first and foremost, give yourself a brief introduction, and then tell us a little bit about tearing your ACL the first time, and kind of the path that put you on.
Okay, yeah. So I'm Mika Reilly. I help ACLers become the powerhouses that they're meant to be after this brutal injury. And I primarily work with teenagers and adults, females in particular. So, my journey, what led me to this path of helping others is my journey really started at 16. So of course, my first love was soccer. Probably still is.
Yeah.
But so my first love was soccer, and I just became super absorbed in it. I didn't start like most people at a really young age playing. I was in a very small town, very large Mexican population, and we had our Mexican leagues. And so my brother was playing in this league, and so that really, I asked my dad, I was like, can I play? Because I was just so obsessed and I just wanted to play. And so my journey started at 11, and so I just became super absorbed in it and played nonstop with the boys and everything. And so when I got to high school, I was where I kind of just kept going and didn't really stop. And I was playing for 3 leagues at one time, high school and then 2 other leagues. And so I think that was probably what led me down the path of my ACL injury, honestly. So I tore my ACL at 16. It was a preseason game, and it was really devastating. I think, I'd never heard of it ever before then. I'd never had known anybody in my hometown to experience that. And so it was just wild. The interesting thing for me is I didn't have surgery right away. Thankfully, we had somebody that we knew that was a surgeon, and it was a friend of a friend. And I didn't actually have surgery right away because I was really swollen, and on the MRI, it didn't look like I had torn. And so I just went through rehab during that time for at least 6 months and feeling pretty okay. And then my doc wanted me to go back and check, and by the time swelling and everything was out, I was pretty lax, and he was like, "Yeah, you're gonna have surgery." So that's kind of where my journey started.
And so you did it the first time at 16, and
Hmm.
then you had surgery. Like, how long was the recovery? Like, talk about the trajectory, because like the
Yeah.
mainstream narrative. Well, I don't even know what the mainstream narrative. Like, honestly, a lot of people still look at like ACL surgeries as like any sort of athletic endeavor ending type of thing, right? Or people come back, but like they're never the same. Which, I mean, you're never the same after like an injury to some degree, right? Like, I
Hmm.
mean, you can definitely get back to, but like it changes you mentally and whatnot, right? But talk about, yeah, having that surgery, and then what the recovery process was like at that stage for you,
Mm.
and then
Yeah.
we'll get into later some of the things that the lessons you've learned.
Yeah, I think, boy, let me just say, I just remember my surgeon saying, "In and out quick, in and out quick," and that was the theme back then. I think, I went nearly like 7 months without surgery, and honestly, I think that was a good thing, knowing what I
Mm-hmm.
know now. But,
Mm-hmm.
um, but I mean, everything happened so fast after surgery. I think, you know, I was finished and complete at exactly 6 months. I was barely lacing up my cleats and stepping on the field, and that was freaking scary. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so I just know, and I remember the first couple weeks absolutely sucked. We were about almost 2 hours away from where I had surgery, and so my mom had to take out my stitches. My mom had to take out my port, and it was not fun. But I think during that time, I went through a big, huge identity crisis.
Mm-hmm.
It was mentally very tough for me, and it was really hard because my family, they're all just, they were at the time, they were just like, very supportive, but also like, "Oh, you're gonna crush this," just very
Yeah.
like toxic positivity. and
Yeah.
and while I appreciated that, it was just really hard because I just felt like, there would be silent tears coming down my eyes during those first couple weeks, and it was just really hard to truly express what was going on during that time. And I don't think at the time I truly knew what was going on. I just was like, this sucks.
Mm-hmm.
And um, Ebbs and flows, of course, through the process. I went into a clinic that, I have to say this, my physical therapist at the time was who inspired me to become a PT. But the limitations of how the PT looked and what I felt after I was completed with rehab was a gap that I was like, I need to fill that. And
Mm-hmm.
so um, I just remember like my PT would he'd always push down on my knee, and it would suck, and he'd say, "Hang your leg a lot more," and it would suck, and I would just struggle so much. And I just remember that everything, I was in this small room. This room was not even as big as like a guest bedroom. And, I was quite limited in what I could do. And it just, looking back now, what it looked like, it wasn't what it should have been. But also, at the time, it was also really hard.
Yeah. 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 I mean, I think, well, ACL, rehab, recovery. I mean, like a lot of the clinics that like that physical therapists are, even just like in medical settings, like they're often like these treatment rooms that like are not conducive to like you can't get strong like
Yeah.
on a table, right, in a small room. And then there's just so much of like, yeah, doing rehab outside of the clinic that needs to be done. And a lot of times the progression needs to be, a variety of things that you're just not going to get when you only interact with somebody like once or twice a week or 3 times a week even, right? But like, take me through then. Okay, so you go back to playing, you're about 6 months after your surgery.
Mm-hmm.
What did things look like? Because just spoiler alert, like Mika retore,
Yeah.
but like, what was that? What was the initial return to play? How did you feel? Obviously, you mentioned being scared, but then how long did you go before a re-tear occurred?
Yeah. Okay, so yeah, I stepped on the field at 6 months, and I was super excited because at that point, having the long gap that I had, I lost completely. I was a sophomore at the time, lost my whole complete junior year. And then senior year was super important for me for recruiting. And so since I had lost one whole year, we had this, of course, my PT's deadline of 6 months, and I, was like, I'm going to do whatever I need to do to get there. But honestly, I had no on-field integration. It was like, okay, it was basically time. And it was like, Mika, you're looking great. Just go and do it. And so I just was like, I think that's a fear that I never really discussed with anybody at the time, because I think it's just was like, you just do it. And so I had this really tiny leg. I have pictures of it to this day, but I mean, this really tiny leg with this big brace on, and it just was like, it didn't feel good. It took me probably almost to nearly the end of the season where I actually felt okay and confident on the field again. And so, yeah, I mean, everything ended up working out, and thankfully a re-tear didn't happen right away, but I ended up getting recruited into college, and so I started playing for college, and that's where my knee definitely didn't feel great, and I felt a lot of repercussions mentally and physically from what wasn't done well. And of course, like, college is another level. College is like, you're training nearly every day, whether it's especially preseason, you're doing twice a days, and it's just go, go, go the whole time. And I had an awesome team, don't get me wrong, but I think it's just, I wasn't mentally and physically where I needed to be compared to everybody else that was a healthy individual who didn't just go through this injury. And so, that's where I decided to pull back on soccer and really focus on my schooling. And so at that time, that was really tough. That was a really hard conversation to have with my coach at the time. Because I mean, it's just like, I was wrapped up and absorbed in soccer, and it was my identity for the longest time. But I think that for me was a huge power shift mentally, because I was like, I need to take care of me. And I don't think the environment that I was in was going to help me at the time. And so while it was really sad to hang up my boots at the time, I was really kind of free at the time to just really focus on what I needed to focus on. And so I think that was a big repercussion for me. I maybe had different rehab originally, would I have been able to complete my full college season, and that could have been a game changer for me. And would I have still made the decision that I did to leave, Yeah. But it wasn't until towards the end, it was weird, because I didn't feel anything, but something felt off. And I think I partially tore during college season, actually. And it just felt off. It felt weird. But I never went to the doctor again. I just kind of was like, well, this is probably what it's supposed to feel like. So I went nearly almost 9 years, 10 years before I finally completely ruptured again. And bucket handled my meniscus. So it was just, again, I did it playing soccer, and I couldn't stay away. And I found an awesome league that I was guest playing for. And I honestly, that day, I tell my husband this all the time, like, I felt so like strong, so powerful. So I was just like a little girl again, where I was just like, oh my God, this is so fun, and it wasn't until after halftime, I think 10 minutes into the second half, I went for a 50-50 ball. And I mean, it's hard when you're super competitive, and knowing that you have this background and this history of being super competitive, but also having this physical history also now, like, it's hard. You can't hold yourself back. Like, you're in the moment, and you're just like, I'm going to go for it. And so I went for this 50-50 ball against a woman who probably had no business doing that. I mean, I would have probably gotten the ball anyways, but I went in for it. And so I got kicked to the back of the leg while I was planted, and the click happened. And I honestly think that was more my meniscus. I question how much ACL was actually fully left at the time, because for about a year before that, I was having off and on meniscus irritation that I was managing conservatively. And I could almost, you know, pivot my knee quite well. And so, which it'd be nerve wracking because I'm like, I probably shouldn't try to pop it anymore, you know? And so I think it was a matter of when at the time. But yeah, so that was in 2023.
How
So
old
not
were
too
you
long
then
ago.
when that one happened?
Just turned 30.
Okay. All right. So, like, it was a good long period. I mean, a relatively, maybe not.
Yeah.
I don't know. It's like this is the hard thing about all this stuff and how it affects our psyche. But it wasn't like you retore in college, but you did have the anxiety of like my knee's not 100% throughout your college career, right? And that's really
Yeah.
hard. And you went back to playing soccer, which I mean, we want older adults, no, not older adults. We want adults like when
Yeah.
you're 30. But um, talk me through just okay. So that one happens. What did you? Well, you're already a physical therapist at this point,
Hmm.
right? So then, how was your approach to rehab better informed or different the second time around?
Yeah, I mean, it sounds terrible, but I actually was kind of excited to experience this with what I know now. And I mean, I this is what I was treating every single day in the clinic. Every single day, my 90% of my caseload were ACLs. And so one, I was just it sounds terrible, but I was just kind of eager to walk alongside a lot of my clients
Mm-hmm.
because it's just a different dynamic. I mean, granted, I already had the history and know what it's like to go through an ACL injury, but now I have a different experience as an adult with adult responsibilities to
Mm-hmm.
really understand how we need to navigate ACL recovery as an adult with full responsibilities a little differently than a teenager, right?
Yes.
And so I think I right off the bat, once it happened, I knew exactly what we needed to do, just calm the situation as best as possible. And thankfully, I had a lot of awesome surgeons in contact. And so, everything happened pretty quickly. So I, worked on the basics as best as I could. I had a bucket handle meniscus tear, so I was stuck. I wasn't going to get full extension. I wasn't going to get full flexion regardless. And so I really had to make that decision. I was struggling with that decision on do I wait to see if I can get this swelling down a little bit and see what I can get out of this before I go in. But there was that risk because it was an unstable meniscus tear that it could be further compromising. So I actually had surgery about a week and a half after I tore. And so everything happened really quickly. But, I knew what I needed to do. I knew that I had to get things in order and focus on the basics right away after surgery. And that's what we did. I think, like most people, have this expectation of what their recovery is going to look like, and that doesn't skip me just because I know what this process was like. And so, I was like, okay, from the get-go, had surgery, we're gonna get going on pain and swelling management, all the basic foundational things that I tell my clients every day. But I struggled. I struggled at like 6 weeks. I extension was solid, but my bending was not, and it was quite concerning. And I'm thankful that I know what to look for, and I contacted my surgeon and said I'm concerned about scar tissue forming. I can't get beyond 70 degrees at 6 weeks post-op, and he was like, you know what, let's try a Medrol pack, a steroid pack, and that immediately changed the game for me. So, which was helpful, but it also meant that Mika's barely starting at 6 weeks really with her range. And so, which also meant I was still on a crutch. I was on a crutch for almost 12 weeks, just because I didn't have the foundation. But the weird thing is like, those 6 weeks I really struggled mentally. I think it was a blessing and a curse that I was working with people going through it at the same time. When you have clients that are I had a lot of clients who had surgery either just a week before me, just a day before me, a day after me, and they were doing very beautifully. Mind you, they were all teenagers, so I had to give myself that benefit of the doubt of like, okay, I'm twice their age here. But it was also really a mental struggle. While I was super happy for them, I think internally it was just very heartbreaking for me, because I'm like, as someone who works with this a lot and helps a lot of people get where they need to, I'm like, why am I not there? And I'm like, I should be there. And so that was a big struggle. The other struggle I mentally had, I'm really open about that, because I don't think a lot of this is talked about enough. Like, I remember, I think on the fourth day, I finally could have my first shower or my bath. I was non-weight bearing for a while. So, and my husband had to help me. I literally cried for 45 straight minutes in the bath, because I think, you have a reality moment where it's just like, holy crap, I'm reliant on everybody for everything. And you go from being able to do everything and get your coffee even, to all of a sudden just being in agonizing pain, not being able to function. And now you're having someone bathe you. And that's a really, really independent thing that we get to do. Yeah. So, yeah, it was tough.
I think it's one of those things. I mean, I have not torn my ACL, at least that I'm aware of. I have hurt. I think like this is a self-diagnosed meniscal tear that I did at jiu-jitsu. I still have some like instability in my right knee. My wife gives me shit. She's like, self-diagnosed, but it was pretty bad. But it like these injuries, they certainly affect like the joint or the body part, right? But like they really affect just your confidence in your ability to do stuff, right? And especially when you come from playing sports or being physical, or it's like a lot of our identity is wrapped up in like me. A lot of my identity is wrapped up in just like, well, first and foremost, like doing physical stuff, but secondly, I just don't like to be helped, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Right, and I think that's really hard for a lot of people who are, you're independent, or they just, it's not that I don't appreciate it. It's just like I just like doing stuff for myself. Who doesn't, right?
Yeah.
But talk to me a little bit about like the mental hills and valleys, and in your recovery, and then in the recovery for other people, because you've obviously worked with a lot of people. It's like, how can you, this is the thing. It's like, it's almost, people put on a smiley face, but there are these hills and valleys that are really hard for people. And I mean, in a lot of ways, it's like, you're gonna get some physical function back, right? We obviously want to make sure that like you're doing the physical stuff well, but like it can, ACL or any injury can like it makes you withdraw from stuff a little bit. So just talk about like the hills and valleys and the mental side of all this.
Yeah, I think in general, that was a big growth point for me, because I knew what I knew now during this the second recovery, that this was going to be a big battle I faced. And so, I feel like my biggest turning point was, again, we like to be helped. And I was like, nope, I've got this. And so I'm non-weight bearing with 2 crutches, trying to move my coffee from the kitchen to the table, and I spilled half of it on the floor. And my husband, meanwhile, was like, Mika, you want me to help you? Nope, I got this. And I think that was the biggest turning point for me, where I just was like, you know what, Mika, why are you trying to do this? Why are you trying to sabotage your situation? Like, you need to be helped right now so you can help others later, and without any limitations, without any restrictions. And so that is really hard for a lot of people, to just sit your butt down and hang tight and sit until you have your foundation, until you have the things that you need to do to be able to do all of these things that you want to do later. And I always tell people, like, say no now so you can say yes as many times as you can later. And I think I'm not, it happened to me too, where it took me nearly a week and a half for me to finally be like, okay, can you go grab my snack, right? And so that takes a while. But I think it's super important for everyone to realize that we want everyone to be able to do their independent stuff on their own. But I find oftentimes that people just rush that and just can't get past that mind block of pushing the ego to the side, putting their independence to the side, and just hanging tight. I think mentally, day 5 for me was really tough. And I usually always say the first week it's like 3 to 5 really suck. And it's largely because pain and everything is really setting in at that point. But I think that you finally are like, you're realizing what just happened. I think you black out for a second. You're on pain meds, you're sleeping all the time, and then you all of a sudden like, oh crap, this is where I'm really at. And I cried a lot. Thankfully I didn't. This time I didn't like cry silently. I cried and verbalized what I felt and talked about it quite a bit. At the time I used my platform, but also just working with clients, also talking about it, and just, a lot of them having those moments too. And I think it was a really powerful, beautiful moment. But once that first week and a half sucked, ended up going back to work really early, and I should have changed my mind on that one. But I was nervous. And looking back now, I was nervous to actually like realize or like sit with the depression, sit with the anxiety. I wanted to keep myself busy, and the best way I knew how was to go to work, sit my butt down and help others at the time. And I think that was a detriment to my progress. And because I wasn't at the time willing to be uncomfortable. And I think mentally be uncomfortable. So that was a big journey for me. And I know what I know now. Would I ever do it again? No. I'm going to take like 12 weeks to not even go to work. So,
yeah.
Well,
hopefully never, like
nope, yeah, I know.
But
yeah.
It's also like, you're a working professional at that point. It's not easy for anybody to tear their ACL, but in kids in high school, it sucks. Like, we don't want this to happen, and we can maybe get into like why these injuries are occurring. Like, there's a lot of factors in that, right? But
yeah.
But kid, they have parental support. Hopefully, it's gonna suck to go to school on crutches or XYZ, right? But when you're like, hey, this is like, I'm a professional. I'm like, to some degree, going to work is probably good for your mental state. Not necessarily great for your knee if you're like just overworking yourself a little bit, right? But that's the thing. It's, I wouldn't want to sit around, even like when it comes to like recovery, it's like you can't just like hammer yourself with like recovery stuff. Like, you need to do what you need to do. Like, you need to work on range of motion every day. You need to do your strengthening like work, but like you also just can't necessarily keep going, like do more. If you can still like overtrain yourself and beat yourself down, right? When you did go back to work, like you went at 6 weeks, how many weeks did you go back?
I honestly went at 2.5 weeks.
Oh, okay. So you were like, you were so, and you had so just for everybody's like really simply, like when you have a meniscal tear in conjunction with an ACL, like basically it limits how quickly you can really start to hammer your range of motion. Because when you have like a bucket handle tear like Mica did, basically it's your range of motion is, we want to not allow a ton of range of motion for the meniscus to start to heal, right? Or the area of the meniscus to heal. But at the same time, your knee needs to start getting range of motion to basically maintain muscular length and start to like build around the ACL, right? So that's a hard piece to be in. And that's why Mica was saying, like, at, what was it? You were at 70 degrees, 6 to 8 weeks post-op? Yeah.
Yeah.
And then the tricky part too is like, yeah, you start to get scar tissue built up around the site of your ACL graft, and then it gets really hard to start to move your knee down the road, right? So it's like a delicate balance.
Yeah.
But she started working at 2.5 weeks in a brace. So
Yeah.
you're treating a lot of people. Like, what are those people saying to you? Like, what are they thinking about? Like, oh, this lady's crazy. Like, why are you here? No.
I mean, thankfully I had really great employers at the time, and I didn't see any new clients, no new clients, only current clients. And I kind of was selective on who I was able to see because, of course, like I don't want someone entry level learning how to barbell lift for the first time, and I can't be there to spot them or support them. Like
Yeah.
that's a danger. So I was really selective. And, I think, they would ask me how I'm doing, and I think it was a beautiful thing where it was just like, I don't think, when you really get to know clients, they kind of become your besties in a way where, they kind of know about your life and who you are. And you share personal details with them, and it's a cool thing. But it's not very often that they're like, hey, how are you doing? Like,
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
I think it was a beautiful thing because they had that opportunity now to see that, but also to, I think it was a good opportunity for them to see, oh, okay, she'll know this feeling. She'll know what this feels like, where they're like, Mika, I felt this. Is this okay? I'm like, oh yeah, I felt that yesterday.
Yeah.
It's just
Yeah.
like any of these like twinges and these things, because like you're on high alert, your nervous system's on high alert, and it's just like for somebody who hasn't experienced it before, and it's their first time, like they're gonna be like, oh crap, did I just F it up? That's the biggest concern that they're always facing, is like these little tiny things that they feel they always resort to. Retore my ACL,
Yeah.
or they're nervous that they did.
Yeah.
And I think, during that time, I think there was a lot of things that were resonating between us both. But oftentimes we would do our rehab together while they were there too. And it was just kind of a cool thing to experience. Some Most of them I actually didn't really say, Mika, you shouldn't be here. I would say none of them really said that. I think I hit it well, probably what I was truly experiencing. So they didn't have any idea that I was probably struggling. Um, but yeah, I mean, I think a lot of people were honestly quite surprised that I was there as early as I was.
What are you most like proud of? It can be of yourself. It can be of yourself in these your recovery from both of them over the course of the last, I mean, like what, 18 years or something like that, right?
Yeah.
But like, what are the things you're proud of, and then how are you? Like, okay, you mentioned this a second ago. Like your nervous system gets put on high alert. I mean, more and more people are saying like that an ACL injury is a brain injury, right? And like to some extent, like every injury is a brain
Yep.
injury if you look at it like that, because like basically what you're saying is that you go on alert. You are
Yep.
trying to figure out like a brain injury is like a traumatic event to the brain. That's one thing, but what we're
Yep.
saying is like you've dialed up your nervous system to now be on high alert to basically try to keep you safe, right? Because if you don't
Mm-hmm.
have, let's say you tear your ACL, and we've actually, there's like some newsworthy stuff to talk about if we want to go down that route, but like there are like proprioceptive pieces in in your ligaments that help you with this stuff, and that's going to affect your ability to perform, right? And it's like
Yep.
you could potentially do you could do something that further compromises your leg, and then you can't walk even more, and that's like the tricky feedback loop of the situation, right? But the I was gonna go into how are you proud, but like there's like you've overcome a lot of these like mental setbacks. Like, what are you proud of, and what are the lessons that you're trying to help other people learn?
Yeah, I think, oh my gosh, I think there's just been so much growth over the past like 18 years, 17 years. I honestly, I think I'm most proud of like talking about it. I
Yeah.
think that's one of the biggest things I'm really proud of, because I don't think I talked about it. I didn't talk about it at all during my time when I was 16. I think I did have I did have a post about this. I at 16 had suicidal ideation, and I think it was just, I think that's where a lot of my anxiety and my perfectionism really set in at the time, and a lot of um, trying to control what I couldn't necessarily control. And I was going through a really tough time around that time, but I didn't really talk about it. And so, um, but over the course of the years, I leaned in, and of course, I've gone through many bouts of mental health therapy, and still to this day, because I think it's super helpful and just healthy. And I think for me, it was just very freeing, and I'm super proud of being able to talk about it, and really try to continue to learn to let go of what I really can't control. I think that's one of the biggest things I'm most proud of. I think the other aspect is playing the long game. I think, and that's one thing that I want everyone, whoever's listening, whoever, you know, just any message that I give them, I want them to play the long game with this, because while we're really wanting everyone to get back to their sport or the next season, it's super important, and I know that that's important to them. But what's most important to me is them developing a skill, mentally and physically, to really stick with it when it gets really, really hard, but also to know that it's not just for a year from now, it's for who you are and want to become and want to do 10 years, 15, 20, 30 years. And I think that often gets missed, and it's really short-sighted when we're thinking just the small game at that point, and that's not really what it's about. And I think that's something that I'm most proud of, especially after my last surgery. It took me nearly about 2 years to actually check off everything that I wanted to do, and it really did take that long for me to help fix all the deficits that I was really facing.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, I think there's an element of most things take longer than we would like. Even under pretty good conditions. And like these injuries are happening pretty much at every level of sport and in a lot of people's just everyday activities. Let's like be honest, right? And
Yep.
the the tricky thing is like you at 16, you were probably playing a ton of soccer, and there's a lot of factors going into it. And like, was that you can always like hindsight's always 2020. You can always
Yeah.
second guess all these decisions, and like to some degree, it's like it can't matter anymore, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't do you any good. But that's where a lot of like anxiety or these are overly reductionistic ways of like talking about these mental health things, but like anxiety is like trying to control for an uncertain future. Depression is like second guessing everything you ever did. Like those mental states are very tricky. And as somebody who has also experienced suicidal ideation, when you're that low and you're starting to have these thoughts, like again, I almost want to say this to people like I was so scared when I had like suicidal ideations because I'm like these are never going to go away, and I thought that was it's like I mean a lot of that was like I was just in a very, very low place, and I was not helping myself because I wasn't like doing therapy. I wasn't like taking care of myself, which that looks a little bit different for everybody. But like you're unfortunately your journey has like led you to a lot of your strengths now, right? In
Yeah.
perspective again, and that's unfortunate nature of life in general, right? When it comes to you mentioned checking all the boxes off of, right? Like
Yeah.
let us talk a little bit about like just the clinical aspects of getting to where you want to go post ACL injury and reconstruction. Like what are the big things that get missed for people, and what do
Yeah.
they do about it?
Well, yeah. So I think one, I just always like to say it just depends on what your level of return to whatever activity it is. So I think that's really going to depend, 'cause if you have someone who's just a runner and that's all they do and they find very valuable and meaningful to them, versus someone who wants to have the potential to say yes to those pickleball games, to soccer, to tennis, there's going to be a little bit of a difference in those return to check boxes. But for me, my sport is soccer. And so I wanted to give myself the opportunity to say yes, if I decided to one day just slap on the cleats again and just go for it. I'm just that type of person. I want everyone to be able to say yes. So for me, biggest thing was the one thing that's often really missing is strength testing. So a lot of people are being treated blindly throughout this rehab, and that's quite concerning because what we don't know, we don't know. And so there are a lot of gaps that aren't being filled. And then at that point, I just talked to somebody who was like, yeah, my surgeon just, she's a client of mine, and she was like, yeah, I'm a year post-op now. And as the surgeon said, okay, you're cleared, just kind of ease into the activity. And then she's like, Mika, I'm so happy I have you, because like I'm clearly not ready. And so she, didn't get strength tested until 10 months into her process, but before then was struggling quite a lot. And so there was just a lot of misdirection. There can be a lot of misdirection if we're just doing things very blindly. And I think strength testing is super important, and just data taking in general is super important, because it's more than just do these exercises, but we could do these exercises till we're black and blue in the face, but are we actually filling the thing that we really need to fill? Yeah. So there's that. That's the biggest piece. And then, of course, integration into sports. So we've got like all these strength markers that we need to test and pass. But we also have these qualities that we need to train. And so when it comes to my field athletes, and for me specifically too, it meant get to a point where I start training the qualities that I needed to train. And so, integrating on field, doing some change of direction, and easing in up to the point of contact. So that's really what it should look like. And, that's just a quick synopsis of it, but it never ever should be just ease in, because I think, you give someone an inch and they'll roll a mile with it. And often what I see is that when we get that ease in approach, it's never an ease in approach. It's always a 0 to 100% in volume, and they're going to practices, they're going to games, or they're maybe not doing games yet, but they're going to practices. And then 2 weeks in, you see these posts of parents or people talking about, oh, well, I have a lot of pain, my knee's swollen, this hurts, and it's just, we don't want that for people. And this is the reason why it's so important to have a process of how we go about things instead of an ease-in approach.
Yeah. Well, the ease-in approach just isn't like, it's like, there's just, even when you do it well, there's a lot of, even when you do criterion-based rehab, you have checkpoints, people still are uncertain, right?
Yeah.
People still have waning and waxing confidence levels, right?
Yep.
Yeah, for what we did for a really long time was just like, yep, you're ready to go. And, depending on the level that people were at. But yeah, they were just never the same, because their confidence wasn't there. And they shouldn't have had confidence because they weren't prepared, right?
Yeah.
So, yeah, and I think it's having a more robust process around it, which is a big piece of what you're doing now. Talk a little bit about just the nature of rehabbing people, being a coach and a clinician type of thing, the process that you've created, and ultimately, how it serves people better throughout the ACL recovery process.
Yeah. So I'm purely remote, and, of course I do some hybrid options for people who are local to me. But in general, I think the biggest thing that is missing is, people, of course you go to a traditional PT, and, you may be seeing 3-4 people at a time, and you maybe get 15 minutes of their one-on-one attention. And oftentimes that time is spent on the table, versus maybe talking about the plan, and talking about, or taking measures, and whatever it is. but I just don't think it's a valuable use of time, because there are a lot of intricate details that go missed when you're in a volume based clinic like that.
Yeah.
And you know, it's just the system. It's the system in general that's caused that. But yeah, so in terms of me, my biggest deal is like I'm really big on communication. I think there needs to be a lot of communicating during this process. The what, why, when, how, where, all of those things need to be addressed, and this is how I can do that through my platform. So I call myself the ACL bestie in my client's back pocket, and so you know, I am accessible to them. If they, you know, I just had a client who likely injured her meniscus, and had I not had my platform in place where they can communicate that stuff to me and we can triage the situation immediately, not a week from now, not 2 weeks from now, and do that waiting game, we were able to, the day of the injury, help it. And so I think that's the coolest part, where you know, you don't have to wait that week. You don't have to wait 2 weeks to ask that question. If people have life circumstances that pop up, if they have pain that pops up that they're not sure what to do with, it's a really great way for me to direct them. So they get their plan on their phone, they get me from a communication standpoint on their phone. And it's just a really great way for people to be accountable, and but also help them work situations that they may not know or understand.
How do you want people to feel throughout the process of working with you, and how is that a little bit different? Like we've obviously talked a lot about this, like, but you're what you're doing now has been informed by your past, right?
Yeah.
You know, what's the difference between how you felt and how you want people to feel going through this process?
Oh.
Again, the process sucks.
Yeah.
Like I
Yeah.
like my content is often like, yeah, you can tolerate some pain. If
Yeah.
we never learn to manage discomfort, we're never gonna be comfortable, type of thing. That doesn't
Yeah.
mean that this shit doesn't suck. Like,
Yes.
it still sucks. Like,
Yeah.
we're still humans inhabiting a physical body that is going to experience pain often because it's telling us that something needs to change, right?
Yeah.
But yeah, so like there is this. What do you want people to feel, and how is that informed by what you didn't have?
Yeah. I honestly, oh, I think the two things that come to mind are empowerment. Number one, I think my biggest, I always tell my clients I want them to feel empowered through by doing,
Yeah,
but also by learning. And
yeah,
so, you know, it's my job and my responsibility, and I take that super seriously, to educate them on how to navigate the process also, and what to do when pain or a flare does pop up. And it's just so beautiful when they're like, Mika, I had pain on the leg extension machine going full range, but I only did mid range instead. I'm like, yes,
yeah,
like they're empowered to make that decision, and they, with that knowledge that they got. And I love that. And then the other part is support. I think, like you already said, this is a really shitty process to go through. And you have a week, or maybe even honestly, it's kind of a day by day situation, where, you know, I just mentioned this last week. I had a client who had some pain earlier in the week, had a little bit of fear with a new thing that we did, and we talked about it the whole every single time that something experienced. But then Thursday, she felt really deflated and didn't feel like she was progressing. But then Friday, she was like, holy crap, like I don't have pain going down the stairs. And it's just, I think, that support to help them. Like, I want to be that safe space for my people, because I think Mika at 16 didn't get that. Or I likely did, but it wasn't construed in a way that I knew how to go to it. And I want people to feel good about that and feel like they can come to me with anything. And I think, mind you, if it's out of my wheelhouse, I'm going to send them where they need to go. But I think just having someone to help you talk yourself off a ledge if you're spiraling, I think can be really powerful. And I think that's one of the biggest things that I want my clients to feel, is empowered and really supported.
yeah. I mean, I think about like coaching. Coaching is obviously, you can't like do everything for everybody, right? Being a good
No.
teacher is not doing the homework for the student. But like,
Yeah.
if somebody has the ability, like when I took organic chemistry in undergrad, it was like that's like the hard class, right? Like, and
Yeah.
I was like overwhelmed pretty early on, and I had luckily like my professors like just come to my office hours, like just come, and you can ask a question, and that will usually feed forward into you actually being able to go and be successful. He's like, that's the difference between people who struggle in this class and who get through it and get B's and A's, right? And I'm like, okay, that makes
Yeah.
sense. And like, that's what this is. Like, 15, 20 years ago, yeah, you just didn't have those opportunities to like advance slightly faster, right? And it's not even
Yeah.
faster. It's just like, oh, I get this. Okay, like a lot of people, unfortunately, like they'll have like a symptom in rehab, and that'll cause them to stop. Or it
Yeah.
is a symptom that they should stop and they don't,
Yeah.
right? And some of this is
Yeah.
like, okay, this is where the communication piece comes into play, right? But
Yeah.
it's a nudge in a better direction, right? So,
Yeah.
Mika, where can people find you?
They can find me on Instagram. That is the only platform I'm on, at mika.reilly.dpt.
Good spot. Like, yeah, stay off all these other platforms. I'm on TikTok. TikTok's the Wild West. I have been trying to be more consistent. It's just the Wild West.
I know. I'm funny enough. Everything's remote and virtual and on a laptop for me, but I'm just not quite there yet when it comes to that technology, especially with TikTok. So,
I mean, all I do is I just save whatever I'm gonna post, especially for reels from Instagram and captions. I just go post it on TikTok. Like, it's just, yeah, it's wild. But there's a lot of ACLers on TikTok, so I've already noticed that. Like,
yeah.
But anyway, Mika, thanks so much for being here. I appreciate your time. Everybody give Mika a follow if you're, interested in the identity shift through injury, ACL recovery, and just being resilient and confident after this stuff. So thanks so much, Mika.
Yeah, thanks.
Peace,
Bye.
everybody.